think we should be good to go. So thanks everyone again. This is part of our Kuali Days track, and we will be meeting with actually two institutions today. One of them, which I'll explain, wasn't able to join, but Davidson College and UC San Diego to share their experience of using Kuali Build to really ultimately get back to campus safely. First, I'm Katie. I'm facilitating today's session. I'm the product marketing manager overseeing Build. If you're a Build customer, you've probably heard me talk about Build features at some point, but really excited. This is one of my favorite stories for Kuali Build of how we've seen our customers adapt using Build in the last year. So I am really, really looking forward to this session. And you've heard this before, but a few notes before the call. You are all on mute. This is being hosted as a webinar and not a meeting, so you are on mute. If you have a question, go ahead and click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window and type your question there. This is a panel session, so I will be taking questions throughout the session. Go ahead and type it in as it comes to mind. And again, because this is part of Kuali Days, this session is being recorded, and we'll make all recordings available in about the week or so before the conference, uploaded to the Socio app. So let's go ahead and have our panelists introduce yourself. JD, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is JD Mills, and I manage the digital transformation team at Davidson College. We're just a small project team who focuses on strategic initiatives like this one.
Great. Thanks, JD. Sean, you want to go next?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Sean Monroe. I am the manager of an organization we have on campus called Lean Bench. It's really kind of our way of crowdsourcing Lean Six Sigma expertise and deploying that on certain projects. And more recently became the service owner of Kuali Build here at UC San Diego. So starting to be able to focus a lot more attention on Kuali Build and everything we do and use it for.
Thank you both for being here. And then just so you all know, Amy unfortunately came down with a bug this week. So she messaged me earlier today. She won't be joining us today, though at some point I know her story pretty well, so I might jump in with some of the things I know Southern Connecticut has done regarding this topic specifically. So with that in mind, I'm going to not share my screen for this one because a lot of what we're doing today is just talking through what each of your experiences have been like. I had a revelation this morning as I was driving to the gym that it was exactly a year ago that I was in Los Angeles and I ran a marathon. That week the world shut down. COVID happened literally about a year ago to this date, which we've all made it a year. I think that we all deserve a pat on the back just for that. But yeah, in particular, it's been a really, really interesting and challenging year, specifically for higher education. So I think what would be a really helpful question to kick off this session. This session is all about how you both used Build to get back to campus safely. And do you think you could describe for us what was happening at your institution when you were initially looking to get back in person campus? What was the climate like? What was the environment like?
Sure. I guess I could try and go first. So Davidson is a small residential liberal arts college. And so like a lot of higher ed institutions, we were trying to figure out whether we'd be back at all. And I think our senior leadership realized and conveyed to us that one of Davidson's main value propositions is the on-campus residential experience. So we were trying to figure out how we could make it a safe experience for students to return to campus. And from the IT side, what technology, what software would be involved in enabling that. So we were in the middle of researching things like a symptom tracker that students would have to fill out every day. And faculty and staff who were on campus would have to fill out every day to see if they were good to be on campus or they needed to go to the health center. Reporting databases to track all this information, and finally, something to deal with this new emerging need of surveillance testing or a regular weekly test that we were starting to see other peer institutions engage in. And so that's how we kind of started to focus on how Build could service there.
Ours was very much a scramble. I think our initial, use for Kuali Build before I was the service owner, we had an immediate need almost as, everything shut down. And then we had research. So a lot of high level research, especially COVID research, that we wanted to stand back up as soon as possible after that initial just shut everything down. Let's put some policies in place and see how we can go forward with getting our research back on track and allowing the very essential research to start up as soon as possible. And there was a lot of questions going around, how do we solve this problem? It came up out of nowhere, and we needed, very customized solutions to be able to collect the data, do approvals, make sure, we're getting the right research back online without overcrowding certain areas of campus. So I wasn't involved in that very initial one, but one of our service directors in ITS took the leap of faith with Kuali Build, I would call it. It was very new to the campus. It was one of the first applications built in there, and it was really a return to research where we get research plans and work with our researchers and investigators to figure out what they need to do and get them back into their labs so they could move forward. So it was a big push. I think we had thousands of applications come through that first build that we put in, Kuali Build. It's very much a scramble, I think, is the best one-word answer to describe it.
I think that sentiment can be echoed by, I know any customer I spoke with at that time, and Amy, I know, would probably, if she was able to join us, say the same thing, where their campus, I know, used a similar process, Sean, to yours, where they used Build to get back to campus for research activities specifically. But the feedback I heard at that time was, it's like every week something new is different. So every week requirements were changing, which having a tool to be agile, I heard, was really important as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, JD, I know one thing that we talked about before the session is, I know Davidson has something like a strike team to handle projects like this. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that and why something like that might be helpful?
Sure. So it's easy to forget how chaotic things were back in the summer. As unusual as they still might be now, it was even more chaotic back then. And so digital transformation, the DX team for short, the fact that we don't have operational work, such as dealing with incoming tickets or maintaining existing infrastructure, made it really easy for us as a strike team to just drop what we were doing and say, we're going to put this other project we're focused on aside for a while, and our sole focus for the next little bit is going to be getting COVID surveillance testing and the reconciliation of who shows up for their test up and running. And so, again, the business of the college must continue even in a crisis. And fortunately, there are, other mode IT teams within Davidson who can make sure that things stay rock solid, while a strike team like DX is able to pivot to initiatives like this one and get them done in a very short period of time.
That's really helpful. I know you both obviously used Build to solve that initial problem you were trying to, but do you mind maybe walking us through a little bit about how you used Build to solve that problem and what your solution looked like?
I guess I'll take this one first since JD took the other one first. Well, like I said, it was really the research was our first. We've actually used it for quite a few other ones, including return to work for staff as well. So the first one was focused on research. The other one was on staff. And we've had some student ones come out as well to address students potentially being able to put in a petition to change their grade from letter grades to pass, no pass over the COVID life cycle that has impacted some of their regular studies. So we've used it for quite a few things, but the first was really that research problem that we needed to solve. How do we get people back? And ended up creating, like you said, the form quickly evolved. It was like every day they're adding features and changing ways that we were doing stuff within Kuali Build to meet some of those needs. Just lessons learned as the first big application in Build, and also when the policies were constantly changing in the beginning phases there, that we had to meet all the new requirements. So it became quite a big application. There's a lot of fields on that form and quite a bit of workflow that it goes through. And we're capturing a lot of different things, like what labs they are, how many people will be in those labs over different time frames, and what buildings they're in, what floors they're in, because not only are we saying like, yes, this research is really important, but we need to, be cognizant of all the other pieces around it. So it's quite a big application with a lot of different fields, like what kind of research is going on, who's doing it, where is it at, what's the need for this, how does this evolve over the different phases of being allowed more and more access and whatnot, and then really kind of thorough review behind the scenes, people checking the science, making sure that yes, this is essential research that we need to be back in the labs for in those beginning phases, and other sides of the campus, a very diverse, spread out campus. We have our health system and we have our academic affairs, like general campus, and we also have Scripps Institute of Oceanography down right on the ocean. So it's quite dispersed, but really bringing all those groups together and doing it in a very kind of orchestrated way to go through those approval processes, make sure all the right eyes are on any of those plans, and really kind of making sure it follows all the path. With Kuali Build was actually great for at the time, because that solution had to be stood up. I think the very first timeline was like a week and a half. So very short timeline to get something up and operational and collecting information. And like I said, we just made it better as time has gone
on. For my part at Davidson, the problem we were trying to solve, like I said, was implementing some kind of regular testing for students at a minimum. Like I said, we realized that Davidson's main value proposition is being a residential liberal arts campus, and we really wanted to have students there. And we were seeing that, other peer institutions were having some success getting a testing program going up that would not just test symptomatic individuals, but asymptomatic individuals as well, just by running the entire student population through a COVID test once a week. So I remember, I think I got the call like on a Wednesday from my CIO, Kevin, and my director, Jessamine, with this assignment. And they said, senior leadership has decided we need to do COVID testing for all students. You have 10 days. So Kuali jumped right to the forefront of my mind, because it's one of the only tools that we have that we can iterate so quickly and easily in, and one of the only tools that was integrated enough to our institutional data to pull up things like student information or staff information quickly and easily. So we had to, pick a test site. I remember getting there on just like a sweltering day over the summer, having the guy with a ride-on leaf blower driving back and forth as we're all like clustering together, but not too close, trying to have a conversation about the best place to do the testing. Eventually settled on our athletics facility, and the Kuali setup, we ended up putting it in the ticket booth of our sports or basketball complex. So we decided we would put a card reader out the ticket booth window and have some Chromebooks inside the ticket booth. And we built this form. It's relatively simple. It just takes in the person's CAT card identifier number, looks up the rest of their information. Somebody operating the ticket booth verifies that the person who comes up from the lookup is the person standing in front of them. They click submit, and it goes into the register. And separately, we also had to figure out whether students who were scheduled to attend their COVID test actually showed up. It's not enough just to track like who was there. We got to make sure we're getting everyone on a weekly basis and no one is slipping through the cracks. So my colleague Tessa Jones built this reconciliation script and form that would allow a test site administrator to, in a separate Kuali form, specify which test groups were supposed to go that day, and then compare that against a spreadsheet of who all those students in those groups were. And that reconciliation process would run at the end of every day. Note who was supposed to attend but didn't, or who wasn't supposed to attend but did, and so on and so on. And she set it up in such a way that it would accumulate points against given students if they, over consecutive testing days, continued not to show up, which would lead to some kind of referral or just a friendly reminder like, hey, you really need to show up for your test. So it was a combination of the form plus Kuali's integration capabilities, talking to our integration platform, which allowed us to connect it to other services. That led to us actually being able to fulfill that request in approximately 10 days. And yes, it absolutely evolved as time went on, but we had to get something going in a very short period of time. And Kuali was the only tool I could really think of to rely on to pull all that off over such a short period.
Now, do you both connect in your solutions build to like a third-party intelligence tool or like a data analysis tool? I would imagine, JD, you said with the reconciliation process, I know you're doing that somehow. Like, do you mind talking through kind of what that integration looks like?
Sean, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. We actually are doing reporting on the our return to research application. What we're doing now is actually exporting all of the dashboard, so all of the applications, all the forms into Excel. So we use that Excel download, and then we load that into a data hub and use things like Tableau and Cognos to report off of the data hub. Is our current solution. I know in the future we've had some talks about improving some of those connectivity ability, so we could actually set up some more advanced reporting in an easier way. But so far we've been getting along with the download and put into a data hub that we report off of.
For our part, we're talking to a couple different systems, but almost all done exclusively through our integration platform, SnapLogic. So in the beginning, when we first created this tool, the primary purpose of SnapLogic was to allow us to look up information from Banner, our student information system, and return it into the form. So the person, again, operating the ticket booth where people were checking in for their tests could see and verify that this person is who they say they are. We also use SnapLogic as a workflow integration step. So after the form is submitted and after the student gets their email saying, thank you for attending your COVID test, Kuali workflow integrations will actually send the entire contents of the form to whatever your integration target is. So we send it to SnapLogic, and then from there we can process it and send it or do whatever we want with it. So we actually end up taking the form contents and picking out a few key fields and storing that in a SQL database, which filters into a Power BI report that our medical team looks at. And the medical team can see things like, alongside the student's last test date, what was their last symptom tracker status? If they've missed a lot of tests and their symptoms are showing yellow or red, that's a big red flag. We should really find that person. But again, using an integration platform or any other number of integration targets, you can take Kuali Build form data and send it somewhere else for reporting purposes or anything really. It's one of the things we really like about the tool.
That's really cool.
I was going to say, I think one thing JD mentioned too reminded me a little more I should probably share. So we are putting it into a data hub, right? Our research, return to research. That data hub, we also have a lot of other COVID related data that's coming from a lot of different places. So moving over to a data hub, we're able to kind of blend a lot of that information together and data coming out from other tools, testing, potential, positive test cases that came back and where those were, and then comparing that to where research might be done. So things of that nature we were actually able to get to as well, which was really great to have, trying to solution and firefight everything that was going on.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think it's exciting to hear how you can use the data collected through Build in analyzing it against different sources, like with the student health information, in order to really get some good learning and analysis. I can speak a little bit to Southern Connecticut, and I obviously won't be able to explain Amy's use case as well as she would have, but one of the things I thought was interesting about theirs is they used a similar process, I think, like I mentioned, Sean, to the return to research process. And they specifically had to create forms. Again, I think it was about a week and a half. Both of you mentioned a week and a half was your time frame for rolling out this project, and to get researchers back to campus safely. But they also used the mobile functionality within Kuali Build, where campus officers would pull up the individuals who had been approved to be on campus at specific times within Build, so they could actually validate and approve that they had the right to be there. So I hadn't heard of a use case that was so mobile integrated, at least in reviewing the reporting, which I thought was really interesting in her use case specifically. Sean, I know one of the things we had talked about before as well is, and I'm sure JD, you probably have this as well, is after you rolled this out, nothing really has stayed the same in terms of wherever you live, your COVID restrictions have somewhat changed over the last 6 months. So how have you changed the process after you initially rolled it out?
Well, I think on every aspect that you could change the Kuali Build form, we probably changed it, right? We've created a lot more integrations to outside systems. We started bringing in things like our building names and connecting the floors that are only relevant to those buildings as you select it, do some of the Kuali API integration and smart gadget functionality. So that was something, you know, kind of evolved with our tool as we were getting more and more into it, right? This is kind of the first application that we really tested build on in a production type environment, I would call it. So just figuring out and fine tuning all of those pieces. And at the same time trying to, so not only were we learning more about Kuali and what we could do with it and using that knowledge to better our form, but all the policies were changing. So we had to add different sets of information as well to the form and make sure we're trying to get our researchers using those latest and greatest versions of it as well. And then we're changing the workflow as well. So as things became stricter or more lenient on what we were able to do, we would change the workflow to meet those needs. Replacing hard-coded approvers with groups was a huge upgrade that we learned we needed almost right away. So things like that, and just really kind of being able to use that. And we're actually still collecting and actively using the form, the return to research form, to this day. So it hasn't went away. It's been over a year and we're still actively using it as everything changes, and really looking forward to some of the new features as well. The submitter control I know is coming out very soon. So that's going to be a huge one for us because, like I said, it's such a big form with so much information. And we're asking our researchers who are also busy with all this super important research to come in and you know, use all of this, put in all of this documentation and information. So that I think the copy feature of that new submitter control is going to be really huge for us, just getting them over into the latest and greatest versions of the form without having to re-enter all of their data and everything that goes along with those requests. So it's evolved over time, and I think it's definitely going to involve more. I already had our director of research, one of our top people in the research arena, pinging me about the new submitter controls and when can we get access to these, and let's make some more changes to the form so we can make use of all this. So it's interesting to watch the continual development.
Watch for that in the in-app notifications. It will be coming relatively soon. One of the things I thought was interesting as we were talking through this a little before is, and we've seen it, if you were in our Kuali Build keynote, you would have seen the submissions for Kuali Build increased pretty dramatically over the course of this year. So in both of your experiences, what impact did using Build for this use case have on the perception of Build across your campus?
Let's see, in my case, I'd say, I mean, we're approaching 60,000 submissions in the COVID testing app, which is just, it's crazy. But, you know, that sort of does change your perception about what this tool can be. I mean, this is almost like a point of sale application. Like this is an interface to the real physical world, someone's CAC card with institutional data through a Kuali form. So when we talk at the leadership level about like what is the future of Build, after having experienced all this over the last couple of months, we see it positioned as the low-code front end in front of our API and integration strategy. You know, the reason we got into Build is because we were interested in decommissioning a large swath of our custom web apps, which again are largely basically forms. And this has proven that by combining an integration platform or APIs with a low-code front end, you can do exactly that. We would have had to build this as a custom app or use, say, our card vendor software, which was not nearly as optimal for the purpose, without access to Build. So it's really solidified its place as the low-code front end that sits on top of our API strategy. Yeah, I'd say that's it.
Very similar here. I think like I said, that initial return to research proved the flexibility and the quickness that we're able to create and roll out small applications, right, within Kuali Build, the form, the workflow, the dashboard, and the metadata around it. So I think since then, it's really grown. I was kind of brought on as the service owner for Kuali Build on campus, and we really see it very similar, right? A no to low code front end that you could do a lot of these very agile. I think right off the top of my head, every time I see a paper PDF form out there somewhere, it's like instantly replace that. But we're really, since kind of rolling it out, our target audience for use was really our development. Again, very decentralized. We have our main IT, but we have a lot of different application development groups all across our campus. So that's our main target, right? Give them something easy that could meet a lot of these use cases that come across their desk instead of opening up custom code and creating something. If they can go to Kuali Build and use Kuali Build, great. And we've seen great success with that already as that's really kind of ramping up, getting a lot of requests from that community. And very soon we're going to release to all open, anybody that wants to use it across campus. So I think we're going to have a huge volume increase pretty soon here. But yeah, we've seen uses all across functional areas, from HR to finance type uses to research, student facing, requests for events on campus will go through Kuali Build. So a lot of different use cases that have come up, and Kuali Build is really kind of that universal tool that fits a lot of those different use cases and all kinds of functional areas.
Yeah, I know you, Sean, and you can speak to this. I know UC San Diego has a really big thought leadership camp around Lean Six Sigma, and you have a training event coming up around Lean Six Sigma. So it's exciting to think that your institution has a tool that can help supplement some of those efforts from a process improvement standpoint now.
It absolutely. I came on board to UC San Diego 5 years ago now, to focus on process improvement and Lean Six Sigma implementation. And I think I've been asking for a tool similar to this for quite a long time, right? Like there's so many of these simple workflows that we could just put a tool around it, make it visible to everybody in the workflow instead of these emails getting lost in people's inboxes and all of those, common things that you see. We had an easy tool to use. So I think I was loud enough about that request that I got to see Kuali Build when it was the first demo on campus and eventually became the owner, right? I think that's how it works at UCSD, probably a lot of other schools. If you keep asking about something, you become the owner of the solution for it.
If you will get the grace, I think that's the saying. So now that you shared a little bit about, okay, this is what people think of Build now, and it's obviously been a really good way to show people the capabilities of the tool. But what about before people were bought in? When you were like, we could use Build for this. How did you initially get the buy-in, either within your teams or within the campus, about this tool specifically?
So, like I said before, we originally got into Build to replace a very large collection of legacy ASP.NET web apps. And these were the type of things that would generate a ticket every semester that would say, oh, you need to change this spot in the form routing, you need to update this piece of text, you need to update the open and close dates on this form. And, Davidson IT is 40 people or less. We're a small central IT, no satellite IT, except for some partnerships type of organization. We're just not big enough to staff a whole bunch of custom developers. So the buy-in, I think, was that we had finally found a tool that was easy enough for, so-called citizen developers or power users around campus to go build their own stuff. Or if we were converting it from the legacy version to Build for them, we could easily train them on how to maintain and make small updates going forward. So that was a major selling point. Again, it could not be something so complex that IT would be stuck with the maintenance of these forms forever. So if you're a small IT shop, Build is great because it's not just passing the buck to the user, it's empowering and enabling them to make changes without having to go through your ticket queue to get them changed.
Yeah, very much. I think what happened here at UCSD is, seeing the flexibility with the research application. A lot of our senior management in IT became bought in on the idea of the platform Kuali Build. That's when I was brought in to help stand it up as a service that we offer to all of campus. And I have to say, I'm not really worried about getting buy-in from campus, because I'm worried about the opposite. I'm worried about getting too much buy-in and just being able to really support the service when the requests start really ramping up. I think everybody I've shown it to, I've done quite a few demos, mostly for like I was saying, our development groups, but starting to, if requests come in from other areas of campus, I'm happy to show it and kind of go through all the details with people. So I've been doing that. And I think every time I do one of these demos, it's always like, oh, I could do this here, I could do this. And people always you can see like the little light bulbs popping up on their head as you're going through it. They start asking those specific questions that is aimed at one of their solutions. So it's really kind of started to take off already. And my concern is more about just being able to, as a service team, because we are very much like JD said, offering it as a self-service type platform. But that will have a support team there if people have questions and want to do more advanced things, or it's their first time using it and they're just kind of getting stood up. So I'm really focused on the other side of that, of supporting all of the requests that I think are going to come in very shortly.
In my experience, having supported implementations previously in my career, I think one thing that maybe I would call out is that I think one of the things you both are doing really well is having an owner over the system, whether that's a team or whether that's an individual. I know having that ownership is really important to get buy-in across campus. So I commend you, both of your institutions, for making that decision. And I'll say, if one of the things you're concerned about for the attendees on the panel or on this webinar is about rolling out across the campus, we have some really good sessions coming up on that. So Davidson, I believe tomorrow, is doing a session specifically on your approach to implementing Build across campus. And then later this week on Thursday, we also have a session from individuals in the IT departments and CIOs, and then someone else from UC San Diego is going to be talking about how they rolled out Build across their institution as well. So put those on your schedule. We did have one question come in. Maddie asked, in terms of buy-in, have you had any pushback from end users of the forms? So the people submitting the forms, not necessarily those building them.
At Davidson, I'd say no, not yet. The primary reason being, again, the majority of the forms that have been created are replacing something that wasn't responsive, that used basic authentication instead of single sign-on, that wasn't mobile friendly. So end users, I think, are still getting a better experience, and we're just going through form by form and making sure all that the links that are posted out there on our website have been corrected to the new Kuali Build version, and working very closely with form owners so that, they know who the audience is. They know who the people are who are submitting these forms, so that they can get the message out that the interface is changing and for the better.
Yeah, I haven't had any pushback so far. The branding looks really nice, right? We were able to put UC San Diego branding around our forms. I think most of our customers are used to putting in requests, right? It's usually a request to do something or move something forward. So it's something they're very interested in getting done for them. So submitting that form is just like second nature, it seems, nowadays.
I think, Sean, you make a good point. One of the things I've seen that can make an impact on that is how your form looks. Some tools out there are a little too customizable. So if your form doesn't look ideal, it can restrict the user engagement. So I think branding the application, which is available in Build, and doing some design on the form can help improve that as well. So we are now in 2021. Vaccinations are quickly being rolled out, but we still have a lot of changes that we'll see in the next few months. So I'm curious to know from both of you, what does COVID look like on your campus in this year? And what advice would you have to another institution looking to tackle some of the challenges of COVID this year?
Um, I I think we're, from a UC San Diego perspective, really trying to focus on getting back to the normal with everything going on, but in a safest way possible, right? I think is everybody's number one priority. So we're still continuing to evolve what that means and how that will look. So I really see Build being, and like I said, we've already created quite a few applications specifically for COVID and Build, and I see that continuing. One, I see those applications staying, like I described the research and our return for staff, and just really expanding how we use them as more and more people start to come back and as vaccinations go out and as everything's changing that landscape. And I have no doubt we'll come up with more COVID related application requests that come in to really continue to support everything that's changing in the upcoming years, until at some point in the far future, we'll be back to total normal, hopefully.
Yeah, it will feel strange when we finally turn off access to the COVID test attendance tracker, because it's kind of like an old friend at this point. We spent so much time in it and have become so familiar with using it. But at some point, things are going to go back to normal and it won't be needed anymore. I don't know exactly what 2021 looks like for COVID at Davidson. Hopefully it's a sunnier picture than, the past year. Fortunately, even though as far as like our own COVID status goes, even though we did have a spike after the holidays, thankfully our students have been following our protocols, and the attendance tracking and the surveillance testing has been working. So we just got back down to 0 cases as of today, I think, knock on wood. So hopefully those trends continue. The occasional need still does arise though. We heard some feedback from students that they wanted a more consistent form of communication from the COVID operations team, so that the emails they were getting could be more predictable and in more, structured format. So, I reached right into my tool bag and pulled out Kuali Build again for that as well. So made a quick form to take an email template in one service and run it through our email system out the other side with some approvals for our VP of Marketing and Communications in between. So like those little things can come up, and even though it's not as like directly relevant to COVID as administering a coronavirus test, it's still something we wouldn't be doing if we weren't in the pandemic situation. And we're able to do that on a dime. It was like a 2 or 3 hours one evening, wild hair. And being able to satisfy those wild hairs makes Build a solution year's dream to be able to pull something off like that quickly.
I agree. I second that sentiment wholly.
I know one of the biggest challenges with COVID has been student satisfaction, especially with so much change that they're going through and experiencing in their kind of life as a student. So JD, I know you spoke to this a little bit before, but what advice would you give to institutions like thinking through that problem as they think about 2021?
Looking at COVID going into 2021, I would say, in thinking about this presentation, the number one thing that keeps coming to mind for me is on the DX team, we're very big on user-centered design. And, don't forget that your build forms that you're making and the processes that they interface with, they really affect students, especially if they're COVID related. They affect them pretty profoundly at this time. I would say, if you're able to, don't leave students out of the conversation when designing any software product or solution. And that includes the build forms that you're making to service them directly or indirectly. So, for example, we knew that in the attendance tracking form that the integration calls we were making taking 5 or 10 seconds to return information meant that students were having to sit there clustered up with their peers waiting to enter the testing site. So you had to think about ways you can reduce that to make their experience better so they don't sit there frustrated waiting for that integration call to run. But it doesn't have to be a build form. If you're implementing new technology, make sure you get the student perspective, and not even just by proxy. Talk to them, because their college experience, the institution will still be here long after this is over, but their college experience has been profoundly altered, and we owe it to them to bring their voices into any kind of software solution that we implement to make sure it's serving their needs.
We had a question that came up as well. And JD, it sounds like maybe Davidson has done this. I'd be curious, Sean, if you know if someone at UC San Diego has. Have either of your institutions done something like a student group to represent the student view? So like the voice of the student group when you're thinking of software development?
So I can answer a little bit on that. We just finished a project focused around communication on campus, the communication collaboration tools that are used broadly at Davidson. And when we get user stories, or we set up interviews with users, we really try not to skip over the individual student personas. So we'll look for people like a member of the Student Government Association, a leader of a Greek life organization, a physics major, a music major, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to get all of their perspectives, because at least in the communication realm, they all have different communication styles, needs. Each department that they're interfacing with administratively might have a different tool that they're using. So I think just really when you're gathering user stories or you're interviewing users, make sure you get a very wide spectrum of student personas to make sure that all views are represented.
I would say ours is more on a project by project basis for the student feedback. We do have, just from my personal experience within Build, every form that would have any kind of student facing portion of it, we definitely had our student affairs groups and everybody that can represent the student voice and reach out to student groupings and get that sampling. We've had them involved to really represent that. So from my just individual focused on Kuali Build kind of portion of a lot of these projects, it was less me reaching out to students, but we really had the representation from them come through our project team.
Thanks, Sean and JD. We had a few more questions come in. Before we get to those, I just want to do a quick call since we're almost at the end of the session. Another plug for the Kuali Build contest. Great opportunity to learn a little bit more about Build and get a Build app for free. The submissions for that close this week. We'd love to hear your feedback on this session. You can rate the session in the Socio app, so go ahead and do that before it leaves your mind before tomorrow. And we will appreciate any comments that you have. We've got a few more questions, and I know we're almost at time, so I'll probably take one of these, or potentially two if we can, and then I'll address them with everyone else kind of following the call if we didn't get your question answered. The one question that we had was, is Build able to combine multiple API fields? When we looked at Kuali before current HR data field, going into research, it cannot be utilized. JD, you might be able to speak to that.
So I don't have experience with other Kuali products beyond Build, but I can say that I have to plug integration platforms as a service generally for this use case. So if you need to retrieve data out of multiple systems and synthesize it into a single HTTP endpoint to be presented to Build as an integration platforms are great at doing that. SnapLogic, the one that we use, again, while not necessarily tailor-made for like real-time response to these requests, it's fantastic for getting data out of multiple systems, letting you route and map and filter it, etc. Ad infinitum until you have it exactly so. And then you can present that as a single integration, either on the form end or on the workflow side. And I wasn't in the keynote, but I also understand that you'll have this Lasso product coming potentially. And I think that would address a similar use case of being able to pull from multiple data sources and synthesize to a single form integration or workflow integration.
I just want to jump in too and add that I've actually been able, since I've been service owner at Kuali Build, they've expanded their API functionality quite a bit. So as far as stacking multiple calls, we were able to do something very similar with a lot of our forms. A big one is like buildings. So we reach out to Tririga, our space platform. We get a list of buildings. With that, the API also sends us the building codes and a lot of other information along with that building. So we have a drop-down where someone can select the building. We use one of the outputs from that JSON that we're getting in from that first call, which is building ID, to then send as an input in another call to a different API that's actually the floors from our space system. So still from the same system, but now we send, here's the building, give us the relevant floors. So our next drop down of floors of what floor are you in this building is only relevant to that building. And we don't have to try to build out a 20 floor and basement list like we were doing before. So there is some new functionality like directly in build as well that you could do even before the lasso piece comes out.
Absolutely. Chaining, if you've never chained an integration, chain integrations together before in build, it really is very simple. You set the first one up, it has its own output. Set the second one up, you say, hey, what's my parameter for this one? Oh, it comes from the first one. So it's just point and click, really.
Thank you both for joining today. Appreciate your time, appreciate you sharing both of your institution stories. Carolyn, Angela, and Dean will follow up with you after just to make sure we can answer all of your questions offline. But have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you all either bright and early or in the afternoon, depending on where you are in the country tomorrow. Have a great one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
everybody.